So I'm delighted today to be talking to a dancer. I will invite her onto the stage in a moment, but before that, dance is a visual art. It's known as Drishya Kavya. I'm getting all inspired to use these words because of Bibek. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Manjari Chaturvedi. So this is not the first time you're here, Manjari. I know that you've been coming to Madras as part of your training, Chennai, sorry.
Yes, that's true.
So you did Abhinay with Kalanidhi Narayanan and possibly with
Priyadarshini
Priyadarshini
Govind,
Govind.
yes.
What if I tell you that Priya's in the audience somewhere today?
Oh, Priyadi?
I know she said she would come, so
Okay.
I thought it would be very interesting.
That would be excellent. I would be meeting her after a long time.
I think your work that you have been doing on the tawaifs is very, very significant. And it's a pity that this work was not started earlier, but some of the earlier dancers, because by the end, when you picked it up, there were very many fewer tawaifs left in India.
I actually say that I'm 20 years too late.
Yeah.
I spent 25 years of my academic research, my dance research, working on the Sufi thought, traveling all over Central Asia, working on that. And even while I was living in Lucknow, I never thought that this should have been done. Now I truly feel that I'm really late, but nonetheless, it needs to be done and spoken about.
So if I could just mention to the audience that Manjari has done some very significant work, and it's totally sometimes antipodal almost, because she's worked in the sacred field of the Sufi traditions. And around 1991 is when I think you began on your Sufi project. And then she worked later with the tawaif tradition.
Don't go so back.
No, I go back so much longer that it's living history. Interestingly, in 1991, I had met Zarina. So I find that so fascinating that when you were working at the height of your Sufi work, Zarina was already getting old, you know. So tell me a little bit about your experience with Zarina. You're a Lucknow girl, so did you know about her earlier?
Yes, of course. And that's what I feel that probably I should have started it much earlier. In 1996, I actually met Zarina, and I did a couple of films for Muzaffar Ali, who's a filmmaker. In those films, the songs were sung by Zarina ji, and I, got to know her. We were there for recordings. But, and then subsequently there was a book launch on Lucknow, and that was, I remember, 1999. And I was asked to perform, and Zarina ji was to perform. And that was the first time that I was on stage with her, and she was singing live and I was performing live. And I till date remember that she came with folded hands, much senior than me. I was just a starting dancer. And she said, if I may use Hindi, she said, "Aapne humko itni izzat di ki aap hamari gaiki par naach rahe hain." Like, you gave me so much respect that you're going to be dancing on my singing. And I was so shocked because I didn't realize why she's saying that. And I told her very sweetly that, but Zarina ji, you're much senior than me. So I'm actually very delighted that I've got this opportunity to dance to your music. And that was it. After that, I kept working on my Sufi thought, traveled, some 30 countries and everything. So I lost touch with Zarina ji.
So just to complete what happened to Zarina in the meanwhile, she became older, and then there was an opportunity she came again to Delhi. And she came in response to a request she made to an organizer of music and dance, who said, "Is there any khwahish? Do you have any desires that are unfulfilled?" And she said, "Yes. One more time, I want to wear a red sari and be on stage to perform." So that's when she came. I met her again in Delhi, and it was in response to her desire for the red sari. In Chennai, there is a very active movement of recognizing the contributions of past women artists who have not got their due in history. So I wonder if you are aware of any of that work, scholarly work as well as performance work, whether it's Lakshmi Vishwanathan or Saran Malya Ganeshan. All of them have been working on different aspects of the Devadasi, and even Swapna Sundari has worked on the performance repertoire both in the temple and in the courts. Is there any linkage that you have been able to establish between your work in the north, where the social structure is very different, and the work that is emerging out of Chennai?
Like I say that, my work, my research has been for last 10 years now, and it has not covered Devdasi tradition. It has largely been the research on the up north, which extends till about Hyderabad and to an extent till Maharashtra and Goa. Because these were the states where the tawaifs and the baijis and the dasis, which they were called, were very prevalent. So I have not much worked on it, but yes, I know about the work. And Swapna ji did that work many years back. Probably, but people did not take it up as if I may say, as they have taken up my work in last 10 years. Probably she was ahead of her time and people were not ready to acknowledge the work of women. Today, we have to forcefully, adamantly, stubbornly make them believe. And I tell people that if you don't want to believe, don't believe, but I will ensure that your children are going to believe that these were rocking women performers and they were not to be used with an abuse.
In one of the visuals that you showed, I saw an image of Gohar Jan, and I think it was a talk that you gave or something. So I want you to recall some of the more interesting and colorful tawaifs you have met. But maybe before we go on to that, would you like to describe what the word tawaif means?
It's very interesting that during all this course, I found that actually nobody knows the meaning of tawaif. The only thing that we know is that it is very interchangeably used as a term for prostitute and generally as an abuse for a woman. And somewhere my academic upbringing made me think that, this shouldn't be the thing. There has to be something beyond that. And that led me to find that, tawaif, actually the word comes from a word called tawaf. And people who know Urdu would know it very well, that tawaf means going round. Sometimes it's used for going round the Kaaba. So you say tawaf karte hain. It's the same thing as we do in temple, that we go round the deity, parikrama. So that is called tawaf. And when I found that meaning, and that was the closest that I found the word to the word tawaif. So now, if I may say that to interpret it in dance, I use the twirls because it is my representation of why that woman was probably called tawaif is because maybe she was doing the tawaf while she was dancing. Now, for me, it has a spiritual tone to it, which a lot of people may not agree because they like to see women non-spiritually. But the women see themselves very spiritually, if I may tell you.
So unlike the southern tradition where there was connection with the performance rituals in temples between the women who danced and the temple life, in the northern part of India, there is no such linkage existing. So your reading of the tawaf as the chakkars actually also links your work with the Sufi period of your research.
But the tawaif is a word which now because for a want of word and because we do not have enough documentation, written documentation available, is, when we translate it into English, it comes as courtesan. So that's how, when people tell me that why is your project called Courtesan Project, it only talks about court dancers. I said, no, it also encompasses the non-court dancers and singers too. But the word tawaif, actually, when we say came around the Mughal period, or, it was very prevalent in Lucknow, Awadh, as it was called, Delhi, Lahore, these were the regions. But where Banaras was concerned, they were known as baijis. So they were not called tawaifs at all. Or Calcutta, they were known as baijis and also as dasis. So there was a different terminology used for them everywhere. Tawaif is one of the word, but Bollywood has made it so popular. in a negative sense, obviously, that, we all associate tawaif very easily with, our own connotations of wo bichari aurat jisko becha gaya, who's a sexual slave, and, she's dancing and singing because she's been forced to do that. And that's all a narrative which has been fed to us over the years by Bollywood.
So Umrao Jan would probably fit into that sort of a kidnapped girl with no agency, but she worked her way up socially through her singing and dancing skills. But the interesting thing is that the tawaifs usually were multi-skilled. They could write poetry, so they were the literary figures in society. Poets would regularly exchange poetry with them. They were musicians, they would sing the poetry, and they would dance as well. The fractured dancer of today who can only dance, or the fractured performer who can only sing or play music, that wasn't the norm, was it?
Yeah, because there was no playback. So the singer had to get up and dance and sit down and sing again, or stand and sing. Largely when you see paintings of the singers and performers, even the tabla player or the harmonium player has everything tied to their waist, and they are all standing and playing. So basically there was no playback. So even the musical structures were structured to suit the fact that the singer will only get up and dance, or the singer will give a break, give a dance, do a tukda or a piece, and then start the second antara. So even the musical compositions were made in the similar manner to suit that kind of a performance. Now we have a playback. You saw my performances, but I'm not singing. There's somebody else singing, which is nicely recorded in a nice studio, and half of my job is done, half of the job I have to do.
But in Kathak, and which you have learned formally from Pandit Arjun Mishra of the Lucknow Gharana, Arjun and I were the same age, and we grew up together at the Kathak Kendra. He was known for his spins, so you must have really got the spins as part of your legacy from your guru.
He made me work very hard.
Yes, I can imagine. He was a bit of a taskmaster. Unfortunately, we've lost him too early. So my point that I'm trying to make is that in the Lucknow Gharana, there is a tradition of bhav batana, which is sort of singing and yourself deciding what you want to expand on and detail to greater degree, moving it from the word meaning to the text meaning to abstracted meanings. Is this part of the repertoire of the tawaif also?
It's the answer to her question, that their performance, and I'll explain it in 2 or 3 points. One is, the stage was very different. The performances were intimate for an audience. There were no concert halls for 2,000 people seated, watching on screens. It was an audience which was right there in front of the artist, watching every single nuance and move of what the dancer or the singer was doing. So that bhav batana was very intense, because even if the nazar idhar se udhar jayegi, wo audience ko dikhega. There's no camera. It was live performance. So it became an integral part. And very interestingly, I'll share one thing with you, which was never told to me as a Kathak student. हम लोगों को बैठकर भाव बताना सिखाया गया. That during the anti-Nach campaign by the Britishers, which was very strongly supported by most Indian reformers, the tawaifs in North, and I'm not talking about the Devdasis again because it's not part of my research, the tawaifs up North were actually banned from standing up and dancing. So only Punjab was a state which actually did not listen to this decree and said, "Hamari to tawaife jo hain wo bilkul naachengi, and how dare anybody stop us?" But rest of the provinces almost accepted that. What happened was, now look at the tawaifs and the baijis, how incredible choreographers they were. They were not allowed to stand up and dance. They sat and did the whole dance. You go to Japan and they say, "Oh my God, mime is such a big art form. Mime is so brilliant. You have to learn it." अरे यहाँ पर वो बैठी कर रही थी. They would tell each and every aspect about the poetry through their eyes, through their hand gestures, without even getting up once. So they defied in a way the diktats that were given to them. Now that bet ki bhav became a part of Kathak tradition, which Kathak dancers do till date. And that becomes an intimate performance. You can't do bet ki bhav for an audience which is 5,000 audience which is sitting. It generally, even today, is done for it would be for an audience like this, where, a expressional piece would be done, performed as a Kathak bhav.
So the poetry that the tawaifs were using, what language was it in normally? And because you mentioned many states, including Punjab, so was Punjabi also part of the...
Yes, Punjabi tappa was there so strongly. So see, music, interestingly, music and dance in India is, now we've classified them into these classical forms, but it was a very fluid structure. And it moved from one to the other. So Gohar Jan is known to have sung in, some 14 languages. Now we can't bind her by saying कि तुम तो भाई कलकत्ते में थी तो सिर्फ बंगाली में गाती, बाकी सब में क्यों गाया? अरे, she would sing in Bhojpuri, in Awadhi, in Farsi. And most of the women, the tawaifs, which is the most interesting part, two things which show me that, Bollywood is the wrong documentation history to study for tawaifs. None of our subjects of history anywhere, in anything, we make Bollywood a reference. But I don't know why for tawaifs, all our references are Bollywood, and we consider that as the documentation history of this tradition. I'm sorry to say, but this is what we have been. So coming to that, these women were well read at a time when most women did not have formal schooling or training or learning. The tawaifs were well read enough to be very fluent in the official language, which was the Persian. Now Persian became the literary language, the official language, and they were very fluent in it. But their patrons usually were talking about in a vernacular language. So they needed to know that as well. They understood poetry. Now, one very important aspect of the tawaifs and the kotha, which is a bad connotation again for us, is that it was also a place where people had conversations. And we can't hold that woman responsible for the times that she lived in. Today we are sitting here, the genders are all combined. In those times, there was a very clear zanana and mardana, whether it was Hindus, whether it was Muslims. They did not mix the genders. So we can't hold the artist responsible. Why did you sing only for the men or only for the women? Why did you not sing for a audience which was a multi-gender? That society was different. So these women were great conversationalists. And interestingly, what I see is that, there was no agency to have a cross-gender conversation, because women were largely not allowed to talk to men. You could only talk to your wife. You didn't even talk to the other women in the family. So there was this whole void of a conversation. Today, and it is not sexual connotation at all. It's just a normal, regular conversation with another gender that you might enjoy. And that was not possible. The only possibility was the tawaif with whom you could have a conversation, you could laugh. If you said one couplet, she would come up and say two more. If you talked about politics, she would, equally talk about that. And the most interesting part is that, we think that men don't like to gossip, but men love to gossip. And the kotas became the places where gossip was prevalent. There were no newspapers, there were no tabloids. So nobody knew who's going around with whom. It's only at that place that everybody knew who's going around. So it became a kind of a social place where, you had conversations, you had art, you had talks. If I may be blasphemous enough to say, this would have been a kotha. If we go back. Because what are we doing? We're having a conversation here. You're having your drinks here. You know, there could have been a performance here. You could have heard a ghazal artist sitting here after a conversation, gone back home, very happy, you know, that you've been initiated into art, conversation, learned something new. And that is what. So people don't like my saying, but I say that all NCPA, India International Center, the Royal Opera House, the India Habitat Center, they are all kotas. Now say what is wrong with the kota. Everybody is paying a ticket, going there, being entertained, and coming back. What is wrong with it?
So let's stay away from the wrong and the right, but my question to you is, many people simplify and say that the bad days of the tawaif came with the coming of colonialism. But we see so many images, the famous image of Metcalfe watching the performance going on, the mujra that is going on. And the word mujra by itself means an offering, so, you know, you presented it before an audience. What actually got them down?
There were multiple things. The Britishers came with this whole concept of what they brought in was the obscenity law. They brought in this this whole politics of debauchery came in, and they found these ready women to be targeted because, you know, they did not fit into their view of ideas. Britishers could not understand our, you know, the way our society was. I'll give you a very small example that even today, you have A-grade film stars, you have B-grade film stars, you have C-grade film stars, and you have porn film stars. You don't club, and I would say, you have prostitution. You don't club all of them in one banner and say they are all same. You don't. There are hierarchies, there are ways, there are professions that people are following. The Britishers actually, post-1857, or even before that, started that. They clubbed all of them into Nach girls / prostitutes. And that, if I may say, post-independence, we, Anglicized Indians, started seeing ourselves through the eyes of the British, and we found everything wrong with our traditions and everything right with what they had, our colonial masters had said was right.
So here are these women who have more agency than most women in India. You know, the photographs of the tawaifs are quite amazing, the way they look into the camera.
I have certain, if you would want to see, I have certain pictures of the courtesan scans. Can we just run them one by one?
This is really, truly interesting.
No, I want to also show you that for one purpose while they are, you know, bringing it on the screen. This whole costume of a tawaif with a tight bodice, cleavage showing, bosom heaving, hips moving. I don't know where that has come from in Bollywood. Because if you see, the tawaifs were covered from head to toe. And here you can see the musicians are playing standing. So probably she was singing and then dancing in between. Just keep running one after the other. They're covered from head to toe. You don't see any cleavage anywhere. Next one, please. No body-hugging outfits that the Bollywood has subjected us to. She's from Delhi. And another thing, all the wives were not Meena Kumari and Rekha. They were fairly ordinary-looking women, but they had art. That's Gohar Jan. She's draped in a normal sari. It's something that, you know, I don't know why this Bollywood-fed thing of obscenity has come into being associated with these incredibly talented women.
So you mentioned a tawaif who I had not read about or heard of before. Inayat Bai, I think her name was.
Inayat Bai Derowale.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about her, because I always love finding the true subalterns.
There is a story that I found. She was Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab, sab kaan pakarte hain unke liye, and he used to play sarangi with her. Now, if I go by our normal, I'm sure you all are well versed with the musical scene. is that I, as a dancer, would have my accompanist, who would be accompanying me for live music, would either be of similar caliber as mine, or would be slightly 19, slightly lower than me. I would not have a Zakir Hussain accompanying me. We don't do that. Now, going by that standard, if Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab, who's such a doyen master, was playing sarangi with Inayat Bhai, meant that either Inayat Bhai was equal to him or could be much more better than him. This was what was the first thing that struck me, that somehow in documentation history, we have given men the title of Ustads, the same men. They were also singing and dancing in the courts of the Nawabs. And the women we've called Nachne Gaane Wale. They were also dancing and singing in the Nawab's courts. What was so different? Only their gender was different. So Inayat Bhai, very less information about her is available, but one of the leading musicians actually told me a story that in his later years of life, when Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab was living in Bombay, he had only one picture of Inayat Bhai with him, a small picture. And he would go to the beach and take 2 of his students. And because he had started singing in films, so he had started getting money. And he would just go to the beach and sit there, put Inayat Bhai's photo, and tell her that, aaj tumhe ye raag sunata hu, and would sit there and sing. For me, that is such an important... Now, there is no proof of it. Nobody made a video of it. Nobody shot a photo of it. But it's an oral narration which is going on, which we know. But I find that as that woman must have been an incredible woman. We cannot see an artwork in separation from the muse which is there. If the artwork is so important to us, the muse is as important. And that's also actually part of the Nawab Jan Mirza Ghalib that I do. There was a woman for him, Mirza Ghalib wrote poetry. She was a tawaif from Delhi. We all know Mirza Ghalib, but that woman till date remains unnamed. Nobody knows about her because history forgot to document women. They remembered to document men.
You'd be surprised that if you walk down Chandni Chowk area, there are so many masjids and public use buildings that have been funded by women tawaifs of yesteryear. So, which is why I find it so strange that with that kind of agency and capacity, how did they disappear? So now let's talk about how you're bringing them back as the last question. This is your work with Nisha in part of the
Nisha
Courtesans.
is just an actor that, there are many actors who are, using that, because I realize that if I give lectures, nobody's interested. And if I make them into a concert, people are very keen to come and watch a 90-minute performance. So I weave stories in between. So the kind of stories that I just told you, what we do is that we recreate the songs of those tawaifs, the old songs, and recreate them on stage as they would have performed in my imagination, using the movements and the gestures that I can from the paintings and the photographs that are available. And their outfits even, I kind of take the color combinations from the paintings that are available. So I use that with different actors and storytellers who come in between a performance and tell some snippet about a tawaif and go back. And while you're saying about the agency, I'll, leave you with that parting thought about these women was, we have to stop doing that bichari woman for her, is the whole Osmania University, which is in Hyderabad, is built on the land of a tawaif. But we don't want to acknowledge it because she was a tawaif. She was the richest woman in that area. She was given a place in the court of Nizam as a umra, which was a senior title of a senior professional. And that woman we don't know about. उस्मानिया यूनिवर्सिटी हमें बहुत अच्छी लगती है, वो उतने एकड़ ज़मीन पे बनी है, उसका there's a centenary celebration which would happen and everything, but we will not remember Mahalaka Bai Chanda because she was a नाचने गाने वाली. That is where, the kind of money that she had. And in that, I came to know that the whole patriarchal setup where it is said that, because they want to be in control of the sexuality of the woman. So it is very easy for them to say that, oh, that poor woman who is an independent woman, she will only find salvation when she marries a man. So that became the story of the wives, that they will only find salvation if they get married and get respectability. And there's this Mahalakha Bai Chanda who writes a letter to her mother in Persian, and she says, I earn money myself. I have 300 girls that I look after. I dance, I sing, I write. Mother, why do you want me to get married and become part of somebody's harem? It is such an important statement from an independent woman that, today, I'm sure that most women here today, if society gives us, if we have financial independence, and if society gives us the sexual freedom, none of us would ever get married.
That's a huge truth. Thank you so much for this fascinating conversation, Manjari.